I'm Piercy Janwell, and you're listening to Unsubscribed. Every episode, I sit down with business leaders to help you question everything you thought you knew about marketing. If you enjoy this show, please do subscribe and leave a review on YouTube or your favorite podcast player. Now, on to this episode. Randy Frisch is the chief evangelist for content experiences and co-founder and president at Uberflip, a MarTech company that is the leader in content experiences. Randy is an entrepreneur, investor, and author of the best-selling book, F Content Marketing. He's a fellow Canadian, and you may have also heard his podcast, The Marketer's Journey, where he interviews top marketers from leading companies. Randy, welcome to the Unsubscribe podcast. It's so great to have you on.
I'm thrilled to be here, and that was quite the intro. And we've overlapped for years. I think the first time we met was on that flight to Marketo Summit, I believe, and I was intimidated sitting beside you because I could tell you knew what you were talking about, whereas I was trying to fake it till I make it.
Hey, I remember that plane ride very well as well, and it's been amazing to see what you've done in that time, and I want to congratulate you on 10 years at Uberflip. That's an amazing milestone.
Oh, thanks. No, I mean, time flies, but also it is a long time at the same point, and it's been cool. I mean, when I started the company with Yo 10 years ago, content had such a different association, I think, in any organization. It was, for good or bad, I don't know which, it was seen as a very top of funnel tool. Maybe that's because of companies like HubSpot who coined the term inbound, which was a great word, and I love HubSpot. But very quickly we associated like content is this thing that lets you get leads. I think today many of us understand that content really is important at every stage of the journey. And that was our vision. I don't think I could have articulated it in that way 10 years ago, but it's been exciting to see the market evolve and us be able to, be alongside /lead.
Absolutely. So take us back, over 10 years ago, like, why did you start the company?
It's a great question. I mean, the real honest answer, I couldn't find a job, but let's not go there today. Sometimes you're forced into entrepreneurship, even though I think it was in my blood. I couldn't find a job, but maybe more so why this company is your question. And interestingly, I think I was kind of the inspiration for the type of buyer we were going to solve for. I'm a marketer at heart. I was in marketing, and there were solutions out there like PowerPoint, which we can still relate to today, that in my mind were solving. I don't know if anyone will remember this, depending on who you are and your decade of birth, but we used to build presentations and solutions like Flash, and Flash was really complex to build what you could eventually build in PowerPoint, and it was built ultimately for the end user. That was my challenge similarly in getting content onto a website. I couldn't do it. I was at the mercy of web developers /IT. And so we kind of looked at this idea of how do you get a campaign out the door really quickly, which I know is something you believe in at NAC as well. And, we said there's a need to get content out in the moment, because the content that matters today is very different than the content that matters a week ago, let alone sometimes a couple hours ago.
100%, and fully agree with you there. I feel we have a similar story in that sense, that I was the marketer and had the same pain point at NAC, which was couldn't edit and create my own landing pages without working with someone else. So it's interesting to hear.
Well, it's funny you say that, though. Sorry to jump in, but early days of Uberflip, and I remember at this point you were basically a service provider, as opposed to the platform that you have today. But I remember going out and visiting a customer, and this customer was already ready to buy from us, but it was more of a entry level individual on the team, very visionary, and they sit down in this meeting with their CMO, a VP of demand gen, and this junior person, and then a head of content. And I'm there to kind of push them over the edge, but really my champion's doing all the selling. And the interesting part of this conversation was watching them have to explain to the CMO the challenge of getting a landing page up, right? Like, and it was kind of the CMO's mind was just kind of being blown as the complexity of it, because you had the content person saying, well, I can't give the assets to the demand person until I'm done the asset. And the demand person says, well, I know it's going to take me a week to get that landing page made. So I kind of lie about my due date for the content asset and the CMO is like, well, why can't we just start to work in pieces? So to your point, I think a lot of these things are just us trying to cobble together a combination of different technologies as well as workflows that weren't often meant for things like content or whatever a landing page may be better suited for.
Totally. So you've been running the company now for over 10 years. In your opinion, like, what were the big inflection points for Uberflip?
Listen, I think there's always internal inflection points and external inflection points. And what I mean by that is, as you're starting up a company, and we'll focus more on the external, but just quickly on some of the internal, there's some key hires you make. There's some passing of the torch at different points where you're excited. One very recently for me was realizing that I was not our best CMO anymore. I was our CMO for almost that, a full 10-year run. But ultimately, we get to a certain scale where we can bring someone in who's taken a company to a different scale than we have ourselves, or, we hit those milestones that we're really excited about. But to me, the true things that propel you to those next levels are those external inflection points. And there's been a few of them along the way. If we go back to early days of our platform, I remember there was this one company who was using us. And way back then, people just used us kind of for a resource page on their website. That was like the early Uberflip 1.0. A lot of people may know us that way still. But there was this one customer who had this idea, I'm going to create a separate, they called it resource center at the time, for every event that we're going to do this year. We're going to completely change the look and feel, and we're going to have different pages. And believe it or not, this was like very forward thinking 8 years ago, whenever that was. That was a sign, I think, of this mindset around personalization. And one of these external factors, I think, is the emphasis on personalization. And that's crept into B2B from trends like a Netflix or a Spotify that can do that for us so well. But it's now the expectation. Now, you pair that with another big milestone out in the market, which is the rise of account-based marketing. Account-based marketing was not something that I could have predicted 10 years ago, but you look at where we are today, and it dovetails well with that personalization story of the need to ultimately cater the content to the buyer on a case-by-case basis. And the last one, just to give you a trifecta here, I think was a shift from, yes, sales and marketing need to like each other, to sales and marketing actually have to complement each other. And that really has maybe been the last 4 or 5 years. I think in the last 2 years, we're seeing that even more and more, which is that marketing is no longer air cover, but marketing is actually got their hands in with either your BDR team, your AE team, even your customer success team, to ensure that they are providing the right needs for communication between those stakeholders and your customers.
Totally. One of the things you mentioned there was your shift from CMO to chief evangelist. I read your blog post about why you did this, and I thought it was really interesting how you narrowed in on the fact that you are moving from marketing to innovators and early adopters to kind of those early majority customers now. How did you know when you were selling to the early majority, or how can other companies identify, who they're selling to and when when they might need someone new to come in to kind of market to these new types of people?
Great question. And, for those tuning in and piecing that all together, that framework that I outlined wasn't my own. It was that of Jeffrey Moore, who wrote Crossing the Chasm, which is such a ageless way to look at the evolution of your customer base and what they're looking for. And I think, the way I described is that I was this, can I swear on here?
Go for it, man. Let it rip.
All right. I was this shit disturber and when I was in school, when I started my first business, when I wanted to start this, I wanted to shake things up. And I think in that situation, when you are in that early market and you are working with innovators, people who I quoted, people like Joe Chernov, who was great to us, Daniel Day, who was our first champion at Snowflake, which is a massive customer of ours today. I mean, these marketers had visions of their own. Some were ready for technology. Some were ready to just share what they thought might be better and what you could do. And I think in that situation, it really helps, first of all, to have a founder out in the market, in whatever market you're in. I mean, in our case, we were solving for marketers. So the fact that I was a marketer able to relate to these customers, it made it so natural for me to be the CMO, and in many ways, that conduit between the market and what we would build and what our messaging would be. You fast forward and jumping over that chasm, as Moore says, is so difficult, which is this idea of how do you go from people who are true visionaries to more the pragmatics out in the market, the ones who need you to bring your solution and say, this is ready to go. Like, you don't have to take a risk here. Here's all these other great examples of how customers have worked well, but more so, here's how we go after that market. And we have to start to verticalize. We have to start to think about different geographic markets. We have to think of really putting that ROI story packaged up nicely. And to be honest, that's just not my forte, right? Like, I want to continue to talk to these, whether they're innovators or whether they're people trying to push the envelope in these large enterprises that we happen to work with. So when I looked at that, to answer your original question there, Pierce, I think it was this idea in my case of just not having that skill of scale when it came to marketing, and bringing someone in who has that experience, who has done that time and time again. And without a doubt, I had no plan to leave the company. I mean, no one believed me at first when I said that, but I'm not going anywhere. And what my role has become is more spending time talking to our customers, learning from them, doing some really cool campaigns with our existing customer base that have allowed us to expand our footprint there as well.
I would definitely say I've seen more of this evangelist type role, but I still don't think it's fully mainstream at every company yet. What do you think it takes to be a great evangelist?
That's a great question. Yeah, when I came up with this future vision for my role and what it would mean for the company, I heard the title many times, but didn't really understand it. Obviously, there's Guy Kawasaki, who is a chief evangelist of Apple, but such a unique opportunity and such scale that, he without a doubt powered. But you also had the true visionary in Jobs there. I didn't chat with a guy, but I did chat with a couple of other people like Dan Steinman, Sangram over at Terminus, a few others in the lead up. And just kind of to your point, I found that everyone had a different definition of what it meant, what their day was, how they measured ROI. And believe it or not, since, and made this only in the last 2 months, a number of other people have reached out to me, and we now have kind of one of these once a month call amongst other chief evangelists. Some are aspiring to get there as well. So it's kind of a fun network, to trade approaches and feedback and, really learn from each other. But to answer you in terms of what I think you need, there's a few things that I think are important. One, you've got to absolutely love the problem that you're solving for. Another thing that's important there, because you'll have a lot of people in your organization who feel that way, is I think it's important to have someone who is ideally been there for a long tenure and has a mindset to be there for a long tenure, because this person very much becomes your voice in the market. And you got to be careful there, because if that person leaves, what does that mean? What is implied by that? So these are things that, and I don't necessarily believe that in all cases it has to be a founder as a result to be that chief evangelist. But I think the last part that's so important is someone who wants to talk to your customers. And so I've spoken to a couple of people who have even come from product roles and customer experience roles or customer success roles, because they understand the way the solution is being used. And that is not always just from internal, right? When we started Uberflip, as I told you, 5-10 minutes ago, we had a specific use case in mind, and we got out there and we told people to do that. But it was people like, Daniel Day, who I mentioned at Snowflake, who were the first to say, you know what, you can use Uberflip for account-based marketing, and here's how I'm going to do it. So when we went and we built some functionality into the platform to better handle ABM, these weren't even our own ideas out of the gate. These were our customers and our ability to connect with them and hear how they approach this, and then templatize that for scale.
I'd love to hear, about how you kind of intake customer feedback at Uberflip and prioritize it, because I know as the CEO, you're getting product ideas from sales, you're getting it from customers, you're getting it from new prospects, you're getting it from the support team, you're getting it from the founders who might have a visionary vision of what they want. At Uberflip, how do you manage all of that? And you've mentioned a lot of your ideas come from the customer. How do you process those into your roadmap?
Sure. So, the answer there is obviously much grander than just me. I'm happy to maybe finish on some of the things that I personally get to do that. But, in a more broad way, some things that are super important is a combination of ways within your technology to see the way people are using your technology. And that could be anything from a piece of tech like a full story, if you're familiar with that platform, where you can see how people are using it. That can be solutions like Pendo that allow for feedback within the app from your customers in real time. Now, the technology piece of it is really important, but also, human communication is really important. So, I believe that the role of technical support is more reactive, but the role of customer success is more proactive, is getting on calls and trying to understand what your customers' business problems are, and then being able to map those or just learn from each other's customers and share those feedback back. So, there's obviously two key elements there within how we get that. You can broaden that out in more strategic sense as well. Like one of the things that we've done for probably 4 or 5 years, I think now, we've been doing a customer advisory board. And I encourage all companies to set up a CAB. I don't think you can be too early to have a CAB. I think, even your first 4 customers can be your customer advisory board. And it's the opportunity for them to get together, share, learn from each other. And most importantly is having a setting within that meetup to provide product feedback. So not only should the marketing team perhaps be there to kind of MC/organize, as they're often tapped to do, but you want the product leaders there. You want, your, representation from your engineering team, I believe. You want someone who oversees the customer success team at that table. You've got to do this in a balanced way, though, where your team is not overbearing on the CAB. I think it's more important that meeting is an opportunity for the CAB to speak versus you speak to the CAB. So those are a few things. I could keep going with ways that we get feedback, but maybe I'll finish with one more, which I think is great.
These are great.
One more to me is, and this one's been maybe the toughest thing in the last few years, but I'd say is events and conferences. I think the opportunity to get face to face with a customer over, at your booth, at a dinner, over a drink, whatever it might be, allows for both sides to let down their guard and really let information flow. So for us at Uberflip, we threw big conferences for many years pre-COVID. We'd have, by the end of it, we had over 1,000 people coming and literally thousands coming virtually to our conference every year. I was in Toronto, and it was fantastic. It was, really an opportunity for people to learn from each other. So I think creating those opportunities, and that's a little harder these days, but I personally believe what we're going to end up seeing is more micro events, rising, where, we may have to go visit in the, local neighborhoods of our customer base and create those communities more locally until people are ready, or the travel industry is ready to bring people back in masses.
I'm nodding my head a lot. There's nothing like real life, and it's hard to get the guards down on Zoom. There's something
It's
about
so true.
having a dinner and maybe a glass of wine or two that you really get to the good stuff there.
Well, you and I said we kicked it off on a plane on the way to an event.
Exactly.
And just, what was it, like 3 months ago that I saw you in Austin. And it was great. It was, I felt like I understood your business. I mean, we're very happy that NAC is an Uberflip customer. Understanding your business allows me to understand some of the pains that you're solving. And it's hard to do that through email and Zoom and things like that.
Totally. Yeah, you mentioned it there. We just became a customer. I read on your website that 70% of content marketing is never used, and that was us. We had a ton of content, great content that we had made over the years, and it was used for a point in time, and we had never really done anything with it. It was sitting in our Notion and our Google Drives, which obviously is not going to help us at all. And having myself built a lot of resource centers over the years, they're never scalable. They always take way too long. They're not personalized. They don't have any recommendations, and there's basically zero insights. So happy to become a customer. But it kind of got me thinking, like, how... Okay, so it happened to us, and we're a marketing company. Like, why, in your opinion, does this happen, that people make all this content and then don't put it out there?
Well, listen, I've thought a lot about this as you so nicely introed me. I ended up writing a book on this, which was, that F-bomb of content marketing that I talk about. And it wasn't that content marketing is not important. It's that it's kind of this mindset of, what's the point of creating all this content if it's not going to go and get used by your team? Now, I think some of those problems happen to do with just the ability to find the right content at the right time. And, you said yourself, we have all this content, and you've been there since the beginning of NAC. I mean, you're a founder, you've obviously, and even yourself, it's hard to find that. But think about how much turnover we've had in teams in the last number of years. Mm-hmm. The great resignation, the changeover, the realities of high growth businesses, adding people. Imagine as hard as it is for you, who may have been there since the beginning, for someone who just joined tomorrow to find content that was created prior to today, right?
It's all on my hard drive.
People end up, like you said, with stuff in their download folders that they want to use all the time, or some sort of pinned document. But it's hard to find that. So I think what a lot of people end up doing is they start to rely on what's new. And often, as a result, they start asking for assets that they didn't even know already existed. And the same problem happens in your marketing organization. If you've had a lot of marketing turnover, and let's be honest, everyone has marketing turnover, because the average tenure of a marketer is somewhere between 2 to 3 years at best. So what ends up happening is we very much approach our marketing. Forget about a resource center. Let's think about campaigns, because that's what we're all out doing. We're out creating campaigns to either generate top of funnel awareness, move the customer through the funnel, engage with the existing customers. And as we do this, most of us work on something like a whiteboard or a Miro today, if you will. And we kind of visualize what we're going to need, kind of either with a, again, whiteboard or, a Visio type of look of how we are going to create a path from awareness through to purchase. And as we do this, we start to create requirements for what's requested. But what we don't do is go search against what we already have. And that's because there's no one centralized place to search for content. A lot of our blogs live in our blog, but then you get into ebooks and they're scattered all over the place, and you have videos, and some of those are on YouTube, and some of them are maybe in your Wistia platform or video platform. But there's not this one place. And that was back to the mindset with Uberflip. It was not just to create these amazing experiences, but it was to have a place where you could first centralize content, have access to all those assets, but then do probably the least sexy thing that many of us skip over, because it's not sexy and it's not fun, but that is to organize our content. And the way we organize content is simple tagging, right? Now, when you think tags, a lot of us think about, tagging for, say, SEM. That's important, of course, but also tagging by the way your internal stakeholders are looking for content. And there are various stakeholders, like we've talked about today. You've got marketing who needs content. You need sales people who need content. You have CS people who need content. So you may need to tag content differently, the same asset, for those different groups based on what they're looking for. And when you start to take the time to do that, then you are set up not just to use your content, not just to move away from 70% of content is unused, but more so to be able to actually respond to customers and create campaigns in minutes versus, okay, how do we get this campaign out in the next 6 to 8 weeks?
A lot of that hit home there, Randy. It really struck a chord with me. That was
it's a
us
trap.
For sure. Between the turnover in marketing and people not knowing where things are, and then you change your brand and you don't want to use the old stuff, so you start over and make the same content, but it visually looks different.
Well, just
I love
a quick comment on that. It doesn't mean that we should use all of our content ongoing, and it doesn't mean that we shouldn't edit our content. I'm doing an interesting piece right now on the realities of marketing in a downturn or marketing in times where the economy changes. And I chatted with Megan Eisenberg, and not so much a downturn for them, but she's the CMO of Trip Actions in the travel industry, which, as you can imagine, complete shift in terms of how they marketed and how they positioned once the pandemic took effect. And she talked to me about the realities of what that meant for her from a content perspective, and that she had to overnight change everything from the tone to the right pieces of content to, just much more focus on giving comfort to their customers in that time versus, education towards selling.
Amazing. What companies do you see that are doing great content marketing these days, and what are they doing that is unique?
It's a great question. I think the biggest thing that I've seen a shift towards is how people are using our platform for account-based marketing. And I alluded already that, Snowflake was, I think, the first company to do that. And I think a lot of B2B marketers are, happy, sick, / also always eager to hear another, Snowflake story, because they are the kings of ABM, and we've worked with some great people there. Hillary Carpio is fantastic in what she's doing to lead the team there. But what I'm excited to say is I'm starting to see those strategies trickle into other organizations. I think, enough of us have gone and seen how Snowflake did this to see other people do this. Kristen Kolb is a customer of ours at Matillion, and they're doing some really cool similar things. Amber Bogey, who just joined ReachDesk, but has worked with us a few times at companies like Degreed and Plug Power. And in all these cases, I think what these marketers are realizing, and I kind of hit at this earlier, is that we need to emulate the experiences that we have on a platform like Netflix, right? And to me, that is where we start to create a true personalized experience. And I've put a lot of thought, though, lately into what is it that makes it personalized, right? The reality is, and you would know this, as a Marketo guru, Pierce, which is 10 years ago, personalized was merging your name field into an email, right? 10 years ago, we'd get that email from a big company. We'd be like, oh my God, how do they know my name? This is so cool. They're like, really know me. I'm so excited, right? 10 years forward these days, we're like, oh, how did they get my name? I know how they do this. They've got some database. They've got some email marketing solution, and I'm just being blasted like everyone else. It's more like, how do I get off this list? So name is important, still the same, but it's not really the key to us feeling like you know me. One of the ways I think about it, as I said with Netflix, I'm sure everyone gets this email. It comes like, I don't know, once or twice a week, and it starts off, the subject is something along the lines of, hey, Randy, we've got great content for you this week, right? And so they've got my name, so I know it's personalized, old school. But then I start reading it, and it starts to say, we've handpicked content for you based on, things that we know about you. And they always manage not just to say that they've done that, but actually show me TV shows and movies that I may be interested in. Those to me are the three elements. It's knowing my name, setting some context, and then actually showing me relevant content. So a lot of those companies that I spoke to in terms of, the Snowflakes of the world, the Matillions, I'm doing a case study at the B2B SMX event with a guy named Nick Toper in a few weeks at SEI. And what they're doing is really taking that consumer approach and turning it into a template that works for scale. So the first element is, I know your name. So if I'm selling to you, Pierce, I'm going to have your name up front on that page. I'm going to have your logo for NAC there. Then I'm going to write something super personalized about how I know you're the CEO and founder, and your belief in the importance of landing pages and making them super relevant has always been there. But then most importantly, the content that I suggest is going to work to the size of organization you are, to the fact that you're in technology. It's not going to be one of my financial services use cases or one of my manufacturing use cases. It's going to be a software case study. It's going to be other pieces of content to get you going at the stage that you're at. And all of a sudden, now you have name, context, and content. And to me, that is that personalization that's really standing out these days in the market.
Nice. Some great tips for everyone out there. All right, so we're getting into our rapid fire section here that we ask everybody. The first one is, what's one marketing trend that you would unsubscribe from?
Oh, that is a good question. I'm going to think about this because I don't want to click unsubscribe too quickly. I would say the term AI is one that I feel is thrown around without marketers understanding what it means. I think we get overwhelmed by AI, and I'm not suggesting that I don't believe in AI, because we actually have an AI component to Uberflip. But I think it's a matter of, how are you balancing art and science? Like, that's the part that I want to understand, because I believe as a marketer that we are not headed down a path of pure automation. In fact, I think marketing automation was the worst name ever for those solutions. Right? It made us think like we just press a button and it's all done. I still think that there's science. Some art to go with that science.
Nice. Is email dead?
I think email is still very much alive. It's one of the apps at the bottom of my iPhone. Doesn't matter where I am, it's there, it's following. But I think the threat, the requirements to break through, like I said, with that Netflix email, that's the level you got to get to. I mean, if that email is in my inbox and yours is next, and you don't know my name, you don't set context, and you don't give me content that I care about, then you're not matching up to the others.
At NAC, we're all about work-life balance. What do you do for fun?
For fun. So I'd say that there's two seasons of fun for me. There's the current season. My kids are actually away. They're away at summer camps. They sleep over at these camps for a few weeks. So right now I'm in the midst of spending time on the lake. I love boating. I've been learning how to wake surf, so that's a ton of fun. In the other season, my answer would be it's all about my kids, and that means I'm usually at a hockey rink coaching or cheering on kids in hockey or watching dance recitals, one of the two.
Nice. Who is one person you admire in the business community and why?
I feel like it's more controversial now, this answer, but I'm still going to say it. I think Elon Musk. I think, and I say that with some caution over the last little while, because he's definitely going down a different path. But what I like about his approach is things that we often talked about as being impossible, as that stuff we watch in movies, are things that he makes happen. And I think that is what's inspiring to me, is that the idea that someone will go to space becomes a reality. The idea that electric vehicles that we talked about forever would not just become something that you bought as a novelty, but something you bought as a purpose. And I use that example a lot in technology and disruption, because I think we get so comfortable in the old school ways of doing things that a lot of the best innovation, companies like yours, Pierce, I mean, NAC to me is solving something that we talked about earlier is so broken. This idea of a landing page and the process that we go through to build them, because they weren't the core of what these other solutions did, but they kind of cobbled a way to do it. That's what we do in so many ways. We took taxis forever because it became the norm until Uber came and disrupted that. We signed documents on paper for so long until companies like DocuSign or HelloSign, came along and said, there's a much better, more streamlined way. And that to me is the excitement about a guy like Musk.
Right on. What's one piece of career advice that you think might help others?
I think a really important piece is to actually write out what it takes to work with you and for people to understand you. This is something I did a number of years ago. And I think I copied someone else's template for this, but it was super helpful. And it was created a 1-pager of 10 things to know about me as a leader. And it was, some high expectations in there, but it's very important to set that and to have that. And I want that equally from the people who are going to work with me to understand what it takes to work with them. It's not just about me. So I think understanding the dynamics for communication are so important, especially these days. You hit, briefly before on the, remote and work-life balance element. We need to understand how to respect the new boundaries that are, being expected in the workplace.
Amazing. Last one. Who else should we have on the Unsubscribe podcast?
Ooh, that is a very good question as well. I would say, have you had Latney over at Six Sense?
No, not yet.
Oh, she's great. I think you should definitely get her on here. I find that, first of all, her energy is contagious, and her, the actual insights and experience that she has is fantastic. She's the CMO over at 6 Sense.
Awesome. Randy, this has been incredible. It's been awesome to hear your story about Uberflip, about, the why you started the company to help marketers be able to create better, more personalized content experiences. Hearing your role about being an evangelist for Uberflip is also super exciting. New way of connecting with customers and prospects. And love just hearing from you about how marketers can do better content marketing. I don't think there's many people better out there to hear that from. So thank you so much for your time and sharing your marketing journey with us.
Thanks so much. And thanks for that, those last words, the marketer's journey. That's my podcast too. So, and I should have said this earlier when I was giving you all those ways to talk to customers. Having a podcast is another great one, right? And, we've got about, I think, a third of our guests end up being customers of ours. And it's a fantastic way to just connect with either your champion or an executive in that organization. So good on you for, for setting this up and having it. And, it's a great format. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day. Thanks for listening to Unsubscribed, a podcast created by Knack. If you enjoyed this episode of Unsubscribed, be sure to subscribe to my podcast and leave a review on your favorite podcast player. If you have any feedback or want to chat, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or follow me on Twitter at marketing_101. Cheers.